un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, I want to be in that building on a Saturday night.
Me too, Marty. Me too. I don't think there's any better place to be than in the Bell Center on a Saturday night when the Montreal Canadiens are playing, especially when it is late in the season and they're playing meaningful games. And then it gets even better when the Montreal Canadiens are in the playoffs, right? If any of you have had that experience of being in Montreal in April and May when the Canadiens are in the playoffs, there is no better place in the world. And hopefully we are getting closer and closer and closer to that, guys. The rebuild is chugging along and everything is progressing well, and it has been a good week. It has been a good week for the Montreal Canadiens. It has been a step in the right direction for the rebuild, and it has been fun, and it has been good to watch, and we are moving more and more towards being able to spend those Saturday nights in the Bell Center for playoff games, and there is no better place on earth than that. So let's talk, guys. This is HABS Therapy Day. So this is another episode. This is episode 3. This is your weekly interactive and bilingual hockey show focused on your Montreal Canadiens. This show, your show is designed to give you objective, informed, and reasoned takes about the NHL and in particular your favorite team, the Montreal Canadiens. We try to stay away from the clickbait and the hot takes. And if you're just looking for somebody who's going to delusionally cheer about the Montreal Canadiens, this probably isn't the place that you're going to enjoy. We try to have objective and fun and intelligent conversations about the Canadiens. Bienvenue à votre émission favorite de hockey hebdomadaire, interactive et bilingue, axée sur les Canadiens de Montréal. Notre émission est conçue pour vous donner des points de vue objectifs, informés et raisonnés sur la LNH et vos Canadiens de Montréal. Vous ne trouverez pas de piège de clic ou de hot take ici, et si vous recherchez la claque ou des rumeurs sensationnelles, vous n'êtes pas au bon endroit. C'est un endroit où vous pouvez avoir des conversations intelligentes sur le tricolore sans avoir vous soucier des conneries typiques de l'Internet. Alors, si vous êtes prêts, commençons. If you guys are ready, this is a place where we can have intelligent conversations about the Habs, and not deal with the typical online BS that we almost have to always deal with when we're on some of the other platforms. So if you guys are ready to go, let's get the show started. So today, guys, we're going to do a bunch of different things. We're going to keep our normal format where we do the weekly review or the weekly checkup, and then we do the current symptoms, then we do the treatment, and then we do the prognosis, right? So the weekly checkup looks at the week in review. The current systems talks about some, current issues that are relevant and topical to the Montreal Canadiens. Treatment is our little take on the rebuild, where we talk about the rebuild and what's going on with the rebuild, and do a little bit of a rebuild 101 kind of thing. And so we'll do the week in review. In the current symptoms section, we're going to talk about the trade deadline. We're also going to talk about Slafkovsky. And under the heading of prognosis, where we look at the prospects and the future of the team, we're going to do a little bit of a feature on Owen Beck. Owen Beck, who has obviously been in the news lately and has now been called up to the Canadiens again. We're going to talk a little bit about Owen Beck and his status, what kind of prospect he is, what we can expect from him as fans, and what his future looks like and how he plays into the Montreal Canadiens' future. So if you're here, guys, if you're watching the show, welcome. I see there's, I believe, 6 people watching at the moment. Hopefully we can build on that. If you're not yet subscribed and you're here watching, please do so. The button is just down here below. If you're interested as well, you can hit the notification bell. And if you enjoy what you're seeing, give us a thumbs up. If you're watching in a replay after the fact, then all the same things apply. We'd love to have you as part of our family. We'd love to have you join. So hit the subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up and hit the notification bell. So without further ado, guys, let's get to work and let's get started. We're going to talk, first of all, guys, we're going to do our weekly checkup. and we are going to check in with the Montreal Canadiens, and we're going to look at the week in review, and we are going to talk about the games this week and what it's looked like. And so there were 2 games this week. The Canadiens, of course, are coming off the Four Nations face-off break, and they went back to practice last Wednesday, and they had a game on Saturday night against the Ottawa Senators, and then they had a game last night, Tuesday night, against the I always want to say Carolina Panthers. I know that's not right, but it's just what tries to come out of my mouth. The Carolina Hurricanes. So 2 victories, guys. We'll look at the Ottawa game first, I think. Let's have a look at the Ottawa game first. We have a 5-2 victory for the Canadiens against the Ottawa Senators. Again, first game back. Impressive performance by the Canadiens, right? They came out of the gate. Obviously, they had struggled a little bit going into the break. They perhaps didn't get the results that they deserved going into that break. They played probably a little bit better than what the results would indicate. And so it was nice to see them come out against the Ottawa Senators, a team who they're in direct competition with for a playoff spot. And they came out and they played their game. They played really, really well. They started the game sharp, and they got goals from Brendan Gallagher and Cole Caulfield in the first period. And then the only real hiccup of the game was, the 2 goals from Ottawa. Following that, the power play goal from Jake Sanderson. And then there was another goal from... Who was the second goal for Ottawa? It was Stützle. Yeah, so Stützle scored that second goal for Ottawa. Then Montreal was able to score a goal late in the first period by Patrick Laine, and it was a lead that they never gave up. They were in control of this game from the beginning to the end. Very, very impressive performance by the Canadiens from top to bottom. Again, playing against an Ottawa Senators team, a rival team. Probably their closest competition geographically, and a team that they are directly in competition with, like I said, for a wild card spot. The stars for the game in that game were so we did our A team for that game, guys, and the A team for that night was again. We'll talk about him later in the show, but Juraj Slafkovsky was the star of the game. He was the performer of the night. He was the guy who played the best. He was the best player on the ice for either team. And again, I don't want to get too far deep into it here right now because we do intend to talk about him a little bit more as the show progresses. We have a little feature on him later on. But also, Arbor Jacki had a wonderful game. Josh Anderson was skating, flying all over the place, much like he's done all year. He's been really, really special this year for the Canadiens. And Cole Caulfield. That first line was really, really good. I very easily could have had Suzuki on the A team for this game as well, but chose Cole Caulfield instead. But again, a really nice performance by the team top to bottom. Picking the A team is always easier in a little bit. In a little bit of a way when the team plays really, really well. In another way, it's kind of hard because there's so many guys to choose from. But certainly it's a lot better when you have too many guys to choose from than it is when you don't have enough. What's up, Billy D and Cheese Wizard? Cheese Wizard asks, are the Canadiens a cup favorite? What do you guys think? Are the Canadiens a cup favorite? What do we think? What do we think about that question, guys? What do we think about that question? So we have a 5-2 victory for the Canadiens. Not just a victory, but a dominant victory over the Ottawa Senators last Saturday. And then, of course, we have the Carolina Panthers came to town last night, Tuesday night. One of the better teams in the league, certainly a team that's already sitting in a playoff position. They're already in that role. So in that sense, they are advanced as far as the Montreal Canadiens are concerned. They're a little bit further ahead. Montreal still battling for a wild card spot, and not really in the race per se at the moment. But Carolina is very firmly in a playoff position. So this would be a team that some people would expect the Canadiens not to do that well against, right? But we've seen in the past if the Canadiens bring their A game, what they're capable of. And last night, they brought their A game. They played a really, really good game, and they beat the Carolina Hurricanes 4-0. First period goals from Slafkovsky and Laine. So they jump out to a lead, they get the lead, and they don't relinquish it, right? I'm not going to say that they shut things down, because they continued to press and they continued to perform. But they got the lead and they held the lead, and they continued to carry the play throughout the rest of the game. Second period goal from Nick Suzuki and Lane Hudson with a seeing eye shot from the blue line on the power play. Midway through the third period gave the Canadiens a 4-0 lead. The advanced stats, as you can see on the right, would seem to indicate that Carolina was a little bit more dominant than the scoreboard would indicate. But again, I think those numbers are a little bit deceiving. Certainly, you know, the possession numbers, the Corsi and the Fenwick are firmly in favor of Carolina. But the shots and the high danger scoring chances are definitely not. Marty St. Louis made a really nice point during his press conference about that fact, and how when you have the lead in the NHL, you know, you perhaps are being a little bit more conservative about firing the puck at the net and giving up possession. Whereas if you're chasing the lead, sometimes you tend to be a little bit more aggressive as far as putting pucks towards the net. And so that, you know, the fact that the Canadiens did get out to that early lead and carried that lead throughout the game might be an indicator as to why they look like they might have struggled as far as, you know, certainly the possession, the Corsi, and the Fenwick numbers are concerned. 3 points from Patrik Laine. Again, a goal on 5-on-5, which is something that he hasn't done a ton of yet this year. So again, that's a positive and something to take to heart. I think that it's a good sign that he's getting that. Again, we had, you know, Kirby Dach was unable to play in this game. He has an injury, which don't yet know how long that is going to keep him out. But they brought Owen Beck up from Laval and inserted him in as the second line center. And that line looked decent, right? Newhook, Laine, and Beck. They certainly, you know, didn't look out of place, and Beck certainly held his own. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about Owen Beck later on. As I mentioned, he will be the feature in our prospect section. So the stars or the A team from last night's game are Juraj Slafkovsky, Nick Suzuki, Patrik Laine, and Samuel Montembeault. Juraj Slafkovsky, for the second night in a row, was arguably the best player on the ice. Again, he's really changed in the last couple games, the dynamic of his game, and he's kind of showing us a glimpse of what he's capable of being in the NHL. But again, I don't want to get too deeply into that because we are going to talk about it a little bit more in depth in a moment here when we get to our feature in the current events or the current symptoms section of the show. Andrew Tibbett says not this year. I think you're probably right. Billy D says not the Stanley Cup. I think you're also right as well. I think Cheese Wizard is kind of playing with us a little bit on that one, but that's okay. Not everybody can be serious about everything. Again, I think we are all pretty reasonable about our expectations with this team, at least here at Recliner Sports and on our, on our shows, Habs After Dark and Habs Therapy Day. We don't really believe that the Canadiens are at that stage of their development yet. So we're a few years off, but certainly I think the team is working their way towards that. So Slafkovsky had a great game last night. Suzuki was fantastic last night. Again, that first line, the entire first line has been really, really good in these last two games. Last night, Suzuki was definitely, again, he could have been a star against Ottawa as well, but he definitely was, couldn't leave him off the A team last night for sure. Patrik Laine, again, had a really nice game. As we mentioned, 3 points, one of which was a goal on even strength. And then, of course, we had Samuel Montembeault with the shutout. Perhaps not the busiest, game he's ever had to play in, but, he made the saves that needed to be made when they needed to be made. And again, that to me, and you've heard me say that 1,000 times, to me, that's the hallmark of a good goaltender, right? You can have gaudy numbers. You can have a 925 save percentage, and you can have all these, goals against average and shutouts and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, what you look for in a good goaltender is one who makes the saves when they need to be made. And, that is what Samuel Montembeault has done time and time again for the Montreal Canadiens this year. Obviously, he has struggled at times, but for the most part, he's been very solid and has done his job and given the Canadiens to win games more often than not. And that's important, right? And that's again, obviously it's great to have Connor Hellebuck or Jake Ottinger or some of these big name goaltenders, but at the end of the day, you want a goalie who's going to make the saves when they need to be made and when it's important. And all indications are that Sam Montembeault is that goaltender, and I think he's had a great year so far, and he certainly had a good game last night. What's up, RDP? Welcome to the show. We're just doing our week in review, guys. So those are the two games for the week that we had, or that the Canadiens had this week. Again, a 5-2 victory over the Ottawa Senators on Saturday night in Ottawa, and then a 4-0 victory over the Carolina Hurricanes last night, Tuesday night. The Canadiens will play tomorrow night, Thursday night, against the San Jose Sharks. I would look to see Jacob Dobesh start for the Canadiens in the game tomorrow. It's not back-to-back games, but Montembeault has played 2 in a row, and I think you would probably look to see Dobesh in the goal for the Canadiens against San Jose. So that's it for the games in review, guys. Again, this week coming up, the Canadiens have games against San Jose tomorrow. On Saturday night, they play against the Sabres, RDP's Sabres, at home in Montreal. And then next week, stand by. Let's just have a quick look here, guys. Sorry, I should have had this prepared, but I didn't. The Canadiens play. They play in Buffalo on Saturday. Then on Monday, Buffalo plays in Montreal, and then and then that's it. Then we'll have another show next Wednesday. So games on Thursday, Saturday, and Monday are the games for the Canadiens this week. 2 games against Buffalo, again, another team that they are competing with for a playoff spot. And so, again, an important game. What do we talk about? We talk about meaningful games. These are meaningful games, right? They're playing against Buffalo, a team that, is in the mix for, I guess, I don't know if they're in the mix, but, they're in the mix as, every bit as Montreal is. And these are teams that the Canadiens have to beat if they want to continue to play meaningful games going forward. Montreal did not play, Tyrone. This is HABS Therapy Day. This is not HABS After Dark. HABS Therapy Day is our weekly show. We do it every Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Atlantic Time. So, we just went through the Canadiens games this week. And now we're going to look at the injury report real quickly. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to look at the standings, guys. So let's have a look at the standings for the wild card right now in the NHL, where the Canadiens stand. So the Canadiens are currently in 6th place, tied for 6th with the Philadelphia Flyers. They have a record of 27-6 in a winning percentage of .509. They are currently 5 points behind the Columbus Blue Jackets for that last wild card spot. They have played the same number of games as Columbus, and so they'll be looking to make that move. I certainly think they're still in the mix. They're certainly still going to be playing meaningful games, and they'll obviously have to leapfrog Boston, New York, Ottawa in order to get into that spot. But again, I think we're looking at Boston maybe faltering a little bit with the loss of Lindholm for the rest of the season, and we don't know. Charlie McAvoy might be out for a little while, so those are things to look for as the the Senators are faltering a little bit right now. They're losers of I think 4 games in a row. So again, if Montreal can continue to play the way they played the last 2 games and make a bit of a move, then certainly they will continue to play meaningful games as the season progresses along. As far as a comparison to last year, currently the Canadiens are 7 points ahead of where they were last year, and they are significantly better when it comes to their goal differential. So their record last year at this exact same time was 22 wins and 28 losses with 8 overtime losses. So they have 5 more wins this year and 2 fewer losses. And basically the same number of OT losses. They have one fewer OT loss. Again, 7 more points than they did last year, and a better winning percentage by I don't know what's 509 minus 448, whatever that is. The goal differential, guys, is minus 24 this year. Last year at this time it was minus 46. So they've cut their goal differential in nearly half from this year to last year. And of course, last year they were pretty close to dead last in the conference at this time, and now they're sort of certainly playing meaningful games. They're not out of it, and they will continue to play meaningful games as the season moves along. So definite improvement from last year, and again, I think that is the measurement, the most important measurement for this team on the season is more about a comparison to last year and where they are, in their progression compared to last year. I think is more important than where they are as far as relative to a playoff spot or anything like that. So I don't know what you guys think about that. Again, I'm certainly, we're not getting a ton of comments, guys. You can feel free to chime in if you have any comments, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you have any questions. I'm certainly more than willing to stop the show and respond to questions, as we move forward. So feel free to pop in and do that. If you're over on TikTok, you can come on over and you can get in the comment section and ask your questions over here. But again, I don't want this to be me just talking to you guys. I want you guys to participate as well. And I want to hear what you have to say. And if you agree with what I'm saying, that's awesome. If you disagree with what I'm saying, that's awesome too. And maybe we can start a conversation about that stuff. And if you're not yet subscribed, guys, hit the button down below. Give us a thumbs up. All that good stuff. That would be great. So I just want to take a quick look at the injuries as well, guys. That is an important part of what's going on with this team right now as well. We have, I guess, 5, but really 4 injuries of note at the moment. Of course, we have Caden Gooley, who remains out indefinitely after undergoing surgery to repair his lacerated quadriceps muscle. Of course, that was the result of an awkward fall in a game against the Ottawa Senators on the 22nd. Against the Winnipeg Jets on the 28th of January. We also have Michael Pezzetta, who is out at the moment with a lower body injury. I'm not sure exactly when that happened. I think it may have happened during practice. He is out day to day with a lower body injury. Kirby Dach is also out day to day. Of course, he missed the game last night. They haven't really given us much of a report on where he is and what type of injury he has, and whether it's a long-term kind of thing or whether it's something that will resolve itself relatively quickly. But we'll wait to see where that goes. And then the other one would be Josh Anderson, and that is up in the air. We saw him go very heavily into the boards last night against Carolina. He was going hard at the net at full speed, and the Carolina player kind of gave him a little bit of a grab and put him off balance enough that he went hurling into the boards. He luckily was able to, gather his bearings for the most part and not sort of go in head first or feet first or whatever. He went sort of face first or chest first into the boards. But again, he did not look great afterwards. I do expect that it didn't look to me like it was a major injury. He didn't get his arm up, in a situation where you would expect, maybe a broken wrist or something like that. It looked to me like, maybe like some bruised ribs or even like lost his lost his breath, but lost his wind a little bit. Again, I don't expect that that's going to be a major injury, but again, I don't like to speculate either, and I don't really have any direct information. So for the moment, Dach, Pezzetta, Gooley, and Anderson are out, and of course, Carey Price, despite the fact that Puckpedia says that he may be back on September 23rd, 2025. I don't expect that we will see Carey Price back in a Canadiens uniform, unfortunately. I think that ship has now sailed. So in response to the Dach injury, we already mentioned Owen Beck was called up, and he played last night, and we will wait to see if Anderson is able to go tomorrow night, and if not, I'm not sure who will be called up. Perhaps Joshua Roy. Maybe they call up Jared Davidson. I think there's a few guys that probably have earned a chance to come up to the big team, but we'll see. We'll see who that ends up being, if it ends up being anyone at all. If I had to bet, if you were going to make me bet my own money on something, I would probably say that Josh Anderson is okay. But again, I'm hesitant to speculate about things like that because I don't really have any inside information. And, we're talking about, the health of these players, and I don't think that's something we should get into any, deep speculation about. All kinds of fights here in the Ottawa-Winnipeg game early on, guys. Lowry is beating the crap out of Clavin, or whatever his name is, Clevin. That's the second fight. I think Hamonic fought somebody there a minute ago. But if you like watching hockey fights, there's a bunch going on in the Jets game at the moment. So that's it for the injury report, guys, and that is it for the weekly checkup. We'll move on to our current symptoms, guys. Current symptoms is our look at the current events or the issues and topics that are relevant and at play for the Canadiens right now. Issues that are at front of mind for the Canadiens and for Canadiens fans. And the first thing I would like to talk about, guys, gang, is Uri Slafkovsky. I see Owen Gale. Sorry, Owen, you've got a question. I know this is early, but what should the Canadiens upgrade at the deadline? Offense, defense, or goaltending? And if so, who should they trade away and bring in? Sorry for being early on this. That's fine, Owen. I don't know that the focus for the Canadiens is on upgrading. I don't know that this is a team that is measuring itself on wins and losses right now, right? I don't think they really care obviously the players care. And, I think whenever you're talking about stuff like this, you have to sort of look at it from two different perspectives. But from an organizational perspective, they're not looking to upgrade. I think that they're looking to continue to improve with what they have. They're looking to develop the players that they currently have. And, if they make any moves at the deadline, I think it'll be more so designed to clear the way for the future, right? It'll be more so designed to make room for their young players and to move on or to re-sign players that are coming to the end of their contracts. Right, I don't think it's going to be about we need to upgrade on offense or we need to upgrade on defense. I think where they are is they're in a spot where the rebuild continues to progress. They continue to improve and get better, and I think they intend to run the course on that, and have that happen sort of organically, and not sort of they're not looking to build this team through trades and free agent market at this at least at this stage of the rebuild. So realistically, what I think you'll probably see, if you see stuff go on at the trade deadline with this team, is you'll see them move on from guys like Evans, Armia, Evans, Armia, Dvorak, Savard, some of the older players who are coming to the end of their contracts. Do I think they'll move all of those guys? I don't. But, I think they'll probably move some of them. And again, the moves will be designed not so much to upgrade the team as much as it will be to, to make some organizationally sound moves, right? To make sure that they don't lose players for nothing, that they don't lose free agents without getting some type of return for them. And so that they can clear some space for the young players who are, getting closer to, to the NHL, and so that, those spots are available, so they don't run into situations like they did earlier this year, where they had guys who guys who were sitting on the bench because they couldn't be sent down to Laval, right? I'm talking about about Justin Barron, right? Justin Barron sat on the in the press box for a lengthy period of time, didn't play, because he couldn't be sent down to Laval because he had to clear waivers, right? Caden Primo kind of ran into that situation. Michael Pezzetta, of course, ran into that situation. So again, I think any moves that they do make won't be aimed at upgrading. It'll be more so aimed at setting the table for the future. So, but great question though, Owen. I appreciate it. We are going to be talking a little bit more about the trade deadline in a minute. So if you want to stick around for that, we'll get into that. But for now, I want to talk about And we're talking, we're on the current symptoms section now, guys. I want to talk about this guy right here. And is this the Slafkovsky we've been waiting for? Est-ce que c'est le Slafkovsky qu'on attend d'avoir? Is this the guy that we've been waiting for? Is this the guy that, you know, every Montreal Canadiens fan has been waiting to see when, you know, ever since they drafted him with the first overall pick in 2022. So, as I mentioned earlier, when we did the weekly review, Juraj Slafkovsky has had two of his best games of the season back to back, arguably two of the best games of his career, right? Ottawa, he was almost certainly the best player on the ice for either team, scored a goal, got in a fight. You know, he was very physical, got out there and you know, played a very, very good game. He was involved, he was engaged. And again, like I said, probably the best game of his career. Even better than the game last year where he had a hat trick. So, again, I don't know that 2 games is an indication that this is the guy we've been waiting for, or that, you know, he's rounded a corner, or that this is, you know, what we're going to see from him every night. Obviously, you know, we say all the time that development is not linear. You know, there certainly may be steps backwards. He's still only 20 years old. But again, I think this was a major step in the right direction, not just because he's played well, but because if you follow the team off the ice and you've been listening to Slafkovsky's interview and you've been listening to what the media has been saying about him, you know that there was, you know, a lot made out of the interview that he did where he compared his game to that of Brady Tkachuk, right? And he talked about having a meeting with Adam Nicholas, and Adam Nicholas is one of the skills development, or the main skills development guy for the Montreal Canadiens, and that the two of them talked about how his game needs to look like Brady Tkachuk's, right? And Brady Tkachuk obviously was in the spotlight during the Four Nations face-off, and yeah, so that, you know, the combination of sort of that realization from Slafkovsky and then seeing him implement that on the ice, right? Seeing you know, the words and then seeing the actions, I think is certainly a cause for encouragement for the Montreal Canadiens, and I think it is certainly a step in the right direction. As with the team, as with any part, you know, of hockey, you know, 1 or 2 games does not make a major change. Again, you look for consistency and repetition. And, you know, we'll certainly look to see Slafkovsky continue that. Frankly, I'm not sure that the Tkachuk comparison is a great one, but if it's put Slafkovsky in the proper mindset, then I think that's fine. To me, I think his game is more refined than Tkachuk's. I think Tkachuk gets involved with the greasy stuff a little bit too much, and I think it detracts from the other aspects of his game, which he's very good at. And you know, obviously, I think that Slafkovsky being more aggressive and being a little bit meaner will certainly be to his benefit. But I think that aggression needs to be controlled, right? I don't think he needs to be, you know, a guy like Brady Tkachuk who's out there, you know, being a bit of a pest, right? I don't think the pest role suits Slafkovsky, nor do I think it's ideal for his game. You know, he has too much skill for that. He has too much talent for that. Obviously, you know, the physical side of things, you want him to use his body, you want him to use his size, you know, but again, I draw the distinction here that I've drawn before of checking versus hitting, right? At some point in the NHL, we've stopped using the word checking, and the NHL now uses the word hitting, and there's difference between hitting, right? And Brady Tkachuk likes to hit, and he goes out and he tries to hit guys, right? And he tries to hit guys hard and blow people up, and you know, I'm not saying that he's trying to make the highlight reel, but it's those types of hits, right? I don't know that that's what Slafkovsky needs to be doing, right? I don't think that Slafkovsky needs to be blowing guys up. But again, he needs to use his size to his advantage. He needs to use his size to create space. He needs to use his size to win battles along the boards. He needs to take the opportunities to hit that come to him, as opposed to running around the ice looking for hits. Like we saw that from Arbor Jacki, right? Early in his career, where, you know, Jack Guy knew that he was big and strong and physical and kind of ran around the ice looking to try and hit guys. And now he's realized that if he just remains patient, there's going to be more than plenty opportunities for him to make physical contact with other players. So again, this, boxing people out, getting in front of the net, taking up space in front of the net, winning your battles along the boards, puck retrieval, creating space for yourself, separating people from the puck, right? Something that PK Subban was really good at in his time. So again, I'm not looking for Slafkovsky to be throwing these giant hits that these Jacob Trouba hits or these Radko Gudis type hits or whatever, or even Brady Tkachuk types hit. Like, I think he's more of a guy who finishes his checks, forechecks, puts pressure on the other team, forces turnovers, and then uses his body to create space and opportunities for himself. And I think that's what we're looking for from Slafkovsky, and it's what we've seen from him, right? He, if you've watched the last couple games, he hasn't turned down very many opportunities for a body check, right? When again, he's not chasing the hits, but when a hit is in front of him and it's available, he takes it. Whereas before, he would kind of veer off and continue with the play and so on and so forth. So if he can combine that aspect of his game with the enormous talent and skill that he has, right? He's every bit as skilled and talented as almost anybody on the team as far as, his vision and his passing and his shooting and, his ability to make plays quickly and all that stuff. I think we're looking at the potential of a really, really good hockey player. So if he can continue the play that we've seen from him over the last 2 games and that mindset that he now has of, regardless of what you think about the comparison to Brady Tkachuk, if that mindset is something that he can, carry through, game in and game out, and that's the kind of player that he's going to be going forward, and that's the kind of player he's going to become, then I think that is the Uri Slafkovsky that the Montreal Canadiens looked for when they drafted him, and that fans have been waiting to see since that day. Right? We've seen a ton of skill from Slafkovsky, but we have not yet seen skill from a 6'5", 225 pound, or 6'4", 225 pound hockey player. Right? It's one thing when Cole Caulfield demonstrates a ton of skill. It's another thing when you've got a guy who's as big and strong and physical as that. Doing it. And again, I think, Slafkovsky probably still needs to mature a little bit as far as his physicality goes, right? Obviously he's big. Obviously, he's got some strength, but I think he probably still has, need to develop a little bit of that man strength. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but, he needs to, he needs to be, one of those guys who, like Arbor Jackeye is, right? Guys bounce off Arbor Jackeye. When Arbor Jackeye grabs a hold of you, you're not going anywhere, right? He's one of the strongest guys on the ice. So I think Slafkovsky needs to work on that a little bit. But again, like RDP says, size matters. Controlling the middle is key. Move Tage Thompson to center, change his career, superstar status. A Slav at center eventually could be a real possibility. Yeah, I don't know if I see that necessarily. I agree with you. Controlling the middle is key and it's important, but I don't know that Slafkovsky needs to be at center for him to succeed. But again, when you have a guy of that size with that kind of skill and talent, that is something that doesn't come along every day, right? That's not something that you see all the time. And if he can continue to develop and continue to learn how to use all of his assets, I think he becomes a pretty special player. A unicorn, right? The Canadiens always talk about looking for unicorns. They look for guys who are unique, right? They've got a lot of guys in their lineup or in their organization right now who are unicorns, right? Jacob Fowler's a bit of a unicorn, the way he plays goal. David Reinbacher's a bit of a unicorn with his size and his skating ability. Lane Hudson is a unicorn, right? Nobody plays say what you want about Lane Hudson, like him or don't like him. I don't know that you can really point to any player who plays the way that he has played, off the hop of his career. Whether you like it or not, he's very unique. So, Anonymous says, do I think Hudson wins the Calder? I think he's in tough. I think it's going to be tough for him to win it as a defenseman. I think it's going to be tough for him to win it in the face of the first overall draft pick, Macklin Celebrini. I think that the real opportunity that he had to win the Calder was for him to put up a ridiculous number, which he probably is still going to do. But his offense has kind of slowed down over the last 10 games or so. Obviously, he had a goal last night, so maybe he's back on track. He had a goal. He had an assist against Ottawa, I believe. Is that right? I think he assisted on a line goal against Ottawa. So, he's back on track, scoring, points. But I think for him to really have stood a chance to beat Macklin Celebrini, I think he would have had to put up a really gaudy number. And that's not to say that, if he gets to 60 points, that's not a gaudy number. It obviously is. But I think it would have had to have even been a little higher than that, because I think Celebrini is probably going to end up with close to the same number of points. He's probably going to end up, he's close to a point per game pace. He did miss a number of games, but I think it's going to be hard to beat Macklin Celebrini. There's a lot of hype there. There's a lot of, attention around Macklin Celebrini. Yes, Demidov is a unicorn, Nicholas. I missed that. If you're over on TikTok, guys, come on over and join us on YouTube. We're live, Habs After Dark. Actually, I'm lying to you. It's Habs Therapy Day. This is our weekly show. You can come on over and join us. Get in the comment section. Unfortunately, we're not going to be answering questions on TikTok, but if you do want to come over here, you can certainly do so. The channel is called Recliner Sports 4. Just open up your YouTube app and punch in Recliner Sports 4, and it'll bring you right here. And you can click on the show, and you can get into the live. After Suzuki, contact up. Do you think Slaf will deserve to be the next captain? I don't think Slafkovsky is in the mix right now to be a captain on this team. That's not to say that I don't think he has leadership abilities, but I think that there's probably guys ahead of him in that conversation. I expect that Suzuki's going to be with the team for a number of years to come. So, again, I don't think that job will be available anytime soon. But, again, Slav has some, obviously I think he's a leader and has leadership abilities. I don't see him being in the, in the captain conversation at the moment. Next up, guys, under the head of current symptoms, we are going to talk about the trade deadline. And so we have we talked about it briefly a minute ago. We're going to get to it a little bit more depth here. Here we have the trade deadline, guys. So the players that I've identified are David Savard, Jake Evans, Yoel Armia, and Christian Dvorak. So before we get started, guys, maybe I'll ask you what your thoughts are on those four players and whether you would be happy, disappointed, how you would feel about each or any of those players being traded, or whether you think they should be re-signed, whether you think they should be let go at the end of the season. I'd be interested in knowing what you guys think about each of those four guys before I get into it. I think those are the four obvious guys at the moment, largely because they are all coming up to the end of their contracts. They are all senior members of the team. They're not, sort of the young prospects that we would expect to see the team, want to continue to develop. Evans, I believe, is 28 or 29. Armia and Dvorak and Savard are all into their 30s. And so I think those are the prime candidates to see get traded. So I'd be interested to see what are your guys' thoughts? What do you guys think about those four guys? Are there any of those guys that you don't want to see moved? Are there any of those guys who you definitely want to see moved? What's your thought on that, guys? Post it in the comments if you're here. I see that we got a few people here hanging around. Well, maybe while you guys are doing that, I'll get into my thoughts. So the first guy I'll talk about is Jake Evans. I think he's probably the most valuable of the four guys we're talking about there. His contract will expire at the end of this year. He's currently making $1.7 million. That is his AAV. To me, I would be very happy if the Montreal Canadiens were able to keep Jake Evans, if they were able to find a way to get him back under contract. However, I don't believe it would be the end of the world if they had to move on from him. For me, the maximum re-sign value, the maximum amount that I would, re-sign him for if I were in Kent Hughes' shoes, which of course I'm not, would be somewhere in the range of, well, not somewhere in the range of, the maximum I would go to would be 4 years at $3.5 million. And so if he's looking for anything more than that, then I don't think that he has a spot on the Montreal Canadiens. I don't think that that's going to be an option. Apparently, we're being told that he's looking for 5 years at $4 million. I think is what Tony Marinaro said on his show the other day. Whether that's true or not, or just a rumor, I don't know. But again, 5 years at $4 million, I don't think flies for Jake Evans. For me, Jake Evans is successful on this team as a fourth liner. I don't think, I think the reason why he has such value is because he's doing what he does as a fourth liner. If he's doing what he does as a third liner or a second liner, he's just an average player or even below average, right? So, the fact that he's doing this as a fourth liner and he's playing above his station, if you want to call it that, is great. But at the end of the day, you can't pay him like a third or a second liner, right? And at $4 million a year, you're talking about third liner money and even low end second liner money, and he just doesn't have that value to the Canadiens. And I think for him as well, being a fourth liner is in his best interest, because if he goes somewhere else with expectations that he's going to move up the lineup and be a second or third liner, then the opportunity for him to disappoint grows. And if he goes somewhere and they put him on the second line or the third line and he even produces at the same level that he is right now, that's not going to be good enough, right? Like what's his he's got right now, what are his point totals? Jake Evans currently has, on this season, he has 11 goals and 16 assists. Incredible for a fourth liner. But if you're a third liner and you finish with 40 points, or if you're a second liner, that's a disappointment. So he's having, the season of his life, and it's probably going to finish with, 35 or 40 points. That's great as a fourth liner, but it's not great, as a third liner who's making, $4 million a year. And so if he goes somewhere and those are the type of expectations that are put on him, the opportunity for things to go sour, very possible. And so, one of the advantages for him of being in Montreal is that he's in a place where the team knows him and knows what he's capable of and knows, the best way to get the most out of him. So, Will Hodder, if Armia is cheap enough, I would keep him. Okay, we're going to get to Armia in a second here, Will. I don't disagree with that. Daniel says, I would love Evans as a fourth line center, maybe a low end third. Yeah, again, it depends on how much you have to pay him, right, Daniel? To me, he's ideal as a fourth line centerman if the Canadiens can sign him for the right amount. What's up, Entertap? Good to see you, pal. Welcome. If they can get him in the lineup, as a fourth liner, with Emil Heineman, Owen Beck, Florian Jacki, Luke Tuck, these guys, coming up the ranks, that's you're solidifying a bottom six pretty well for the future if you've got those guys in line. But again, if you can't sign him and he goes somewhere else, it's not the end of the world, right? Because you do have, Owen Beck, and you do have Florian Jacki, and you do have Luke Tuck, and you have, a lot of these guys, who can come in and fill that role. Obviously, it's going to set you back a little bit, right? If you have to bring up Owen Beck to play in Jake Evans' role next year, then I don't think you can expect Owen Beck to step in and just replace Jake Evans. He's not going to do that, right? It's going to take, there's going to be a learning period or a learning curve there for him to get to that point. Like, he's not going to go out and kill penalties the way Jake Evans does. He's not going to play with the same poise and veteran experience that Jake Evans does. So obviously I think they can replace Jake Evans and they have the manpower to do it. But what it does is it takes away that sort of, if Jake Evans stays with the team, then Owen Beck can come up and play with Jake Evans for a few years, learn from him, and then become Jake Evans. Whereas if Jake Evans leaves, then Owen Beck, there will be a bit of an intervening period where there will have to be further development. There'll have to be development either way, but again, you're replacing a veteran guy who's proven with a young guy who still needs to develop. So let's get to Armia in response to Will here. Armia, Yoel Armia, Mario Armia, whatever you want to call him. His contract also expires at the end of this year, and his current AAV is double Jake Evans. So currently he is making $3.4 million. I like Armia. I think, specifically in the last, couple months, he's definitely shown that he has some value. I don't believe that he has $3.4 million value. He's obviously a little bit older than Jake Evans. Not sure exactly. I think he's 31 or 32. I could be wrong on that. Maybe I should confirm just to be sure. Yoel Armia, NHL. Yoel Armia is 31. So Yoel Armia is 31. He has 10 goals and 14 assists this year for 24 points. So not far off. Not far off of where Jake Evans is. He's a bigger body, but he's a little bit older. I would re-sign him. Again, for me, the maximum re-sign would be something like $2.5 million times 2 years. If he wants to do that, then great. I don't know that he would. I know he has expressed that he wants to stay in Montreal. But again, I think if he's going to stay in Montreal, he's going to have to take a pay cut. And the question will become whether he, is willing to do that. He obviously has a close friendship with Patrick Laine, which will, obviously help. I think, both Evans and Armia both have an interest in sticking with this team and playing out the rebuild. I think they enjoy the atmosphere. I think they like the, what the team is trying to do. But, like Evans, I think if Armia goes, then that's okay. If he stays, that's okay too. I don't see Armia sticking around for as long as Evans, which is why I have him down at 2 years instead of 3 or 4 or even 5. If Armia sticks around, that's great. I don't think that all 4 of these guys can stick around. But if 1 or 2 of them do, then I don't think it's the end of the world. For me, I think the trade value for a guy like, I didn't say that. So the trade value for a guy like Evans for me would be something like a 2nd round draft pick, or a B-level prospect, or maybe, an established player, a third liner type player from an NHL team. Not great trade value. Maybe you could only, I'm not sure you would get a second round draft pick for Evans, but 2nd or 3rd round. Armia, I think you're looking at a 3rd round or a 4th round draft pick. You're probably looking at a lower level prospect, and maybe if you wanted to get an established player, you could get some kind of a 4th liner or a project type player for Armia. Christian Dvorak's contract expires this year. He's making $4.45 million. If I was going to re-sign him, again, Dvorak's value to the Canadiens comes as a left-handed centerman, right? He's the only left-handed centerman on the team. He's obviously very good at face-offs, and he's played well lately. He's played better lately, I guess we can say. But again, going into next season without any real prospect of a left-handed centerman who is, better than average at face-offs is a question that the Canadiens are going to want to try and answer. And I guess the question becomes: Is there a guy out there who can do that? Who you can get who can do the job better than that? Right? Is there a guy who you can Is there a left-handed centerman out there in the league that you feel like as the Canadiens GM you feel like you can get your hands on who can play that role if you let Dvorak go? Right? What do you do with that? I don't know. I mean, obviously Dvorak has been disappointing for the most part during his time here in Montreal. He has played better, over the last month and a half or so, which recency bias, I guess, but do you, how much weight are you going to put on the last month and a half versus, the previous several years of disappointing performance from a guy like Dvorak? And again, how big a hole is it going to leave in your lineup if you don't have any left-handed centermen? So those are the questions, you have to ask yourself about Dvorak. To me, I would consider re-signing him on a short-term contract. If you wanted, if he was willing to stick around, for 1 year at $2 million or, something around that, I think maybe you consider keeping him. Otherwise, I think you're out there searching for a left-handed centerman, and you've got to kind of ask yourself whether you have that guy. So left-handed centerman in the organization, I believe there's obviously Dvorak right now, and then I believe Newhook is in that category. You're going to have to just excuse me as I look this up. Montreal Canadiens depth chart. They have Dvorak as a left-handed centerman. Newhook is left-handed if he wants to play, if he's going to play center. I mean, Pizzetta, if you want to consider him a centerman. Joshua Roy is a left-handed potential centerman. Condata is a left-handed centerman. Barré-Boulet is potentially a left-handed centerman. Gignac, left-handed. Sean Farrell, left-handed. Jared Davidson, left-handed. And Xavier Simoneau, left-handed. Demidov is left-handed and may or may not be a centerman. We shall see. Smolanik, Smith, Erickson. So the cupboard is pretty dry as far as left-handed centermen are concerned. So I guess that is the big factor in favor of keeping Christian Dvorak. But we'll see. We'll see what they can do. Let me just go through David Savard here, guys, and I'll get to the questions. There's good questions there, and we'll get there. So the last guy is David Savard. His contract expires at the end of this year as well. He's currently making $3.5 million. I would consider re-signing him, not so much for his play on the ice as much as it is for his leadership and what he can bring off the ice and sort of his, the role model that he's able to play for the younger players. I would consider re-signing him for, 2 years at, $1.25 or $1.5 million, maybe even a little bit less than that, and have him, play the role of a seventh defenseman where he gets into the game every, third or fourth or fifth game, spells anybody who gets hurt or needs a rest and starts transitioning his way into possibly, being a coach or some sort of, coaching role with the team, sort of a la Paul Byron kind of situation. So if I think that David Savard has demonstrated that he obviously likes Montreal. His family has settled down here. He's a local boy. He wants to be here. And so if you could sort of work out a deal with him where, you keep him for another couple years at $1 million and he becomes your seventh defenseman, and, so you've got him as the seventh defenseman, and then you can still bring up, a defenseman from Laval if you want to give them a game or two in the NHL, but he's not a regular in your lineup anymore. But he's still in the dressing room. He's still around the team. He's still on the road trips. He's still there to be a role model. Maybe he's a guy who, when Ivan Demidov moves to North America, maybe he's a guy who, Demidov could stay with and live with, for a year while he gets acclimatized to living in Canada, learn some French, all that good stuff, right? That's the kind of role that I think that David Savard could have on this team. And I think that, he, could eventually move into, some sort of a coaching role, whether it doesn't even have to be on the bench. It could just, could be, sort of, like I said, like a Paul Byron kind of situation, something like that. So that's kind of what I envision. I mean, that's obviously speculation on my part. I don't have any sort of deep insight into that, but those are my thoughts. As far as Savard goes, I don't think he has a ton of trade value. His major trade value comes from two things. One, he's a right-handed defenseman, and two, he is a Stanley Cup winner, right? So he has a ton of playoff experience. He's a guy who can go out there and again, I'm not sure where he is physically and how much ice time he can give a team on a playoff run. I mean, that remains to be seen, whether he's a guy who can even give you 10 or 12 minutes a game. But, he's certainly a guy who, if you put him out there, he'll eat pucks. He won't make any mistakes. He won't do anything spectacular, but he also won't screw up either. And he brings experience with the Stanley Cup win and, a ton of playoff games under his belt. So those two things I think will sort of lend some value to him. Maybe he's worth a second or third round draft pick, maybe a B-level prospect, something like that. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on the main four guys at the trade deadline. Again, as I said earlier in response to a question, I don't really see the Canadiens going into this trade deadline with a view to upgrading or improving or finding a top six scorer or anything like that. I think at this point, any moves that they make at the deadline are more likely to be aimed at setting the table for what happens next. Like as we go forward, making room for younger players to enter the roster, and making sure that you don't lose any of these guys for nothing. Right? These are all guys whose contracts are expiring. And so, hopefully you want to try and get something for them on the way out the door if you're not able to re-sign them. Entertap with a great question here. I don't want to answer this one. So Entertap suggests that you stand by. And I don't disagree with this. Need to package an Evans and Armia, and this could get you a first or a solid prospect, which is what Hughes is seeking. I agree with that, and it's in my notes here. I expect probably two of those four guys will be traded by the deadline. I don't think they'll let any of them go for nothing, but certainly if they're more likely to let a Dvorak or a Savard go for nothing than they are to let Armia or Evans go for nothing. Like I said earlier, if Evans is looking for $4 million at 5 years, I don't think that that's going to work. So yeah, I mean, if you do pair Evans and Armia together and send them to a contender that maybe needs a little bit of help on their penalty kill, needs some depth in their bottom. So I mean, Evans and Armia on a fourth line. I can't imagine there are any teams in the NHL that aren't improved by having those two guys on their fourth line. Right? Those are two really good penalty killers, and 2/3 of a really, really solid bottom six. They would make any fourth line in the NHL better. And so as Entertap points out, if you do pair them together and trade them as a package, then you're looking at possibly getting a decent return. Right now instead of talking about a second or a third round draft pick, maybe you're talking about a first round draft pick, or maybe you're talking about a second round pick and a prospect or something like that. And again, people are talking a lot about the Canadiens maybe having too many draft picks. But again, if they're able to get another first round draft pick or another high second round draft pick, then they can package those picks together in an effort to move up or what have you, right? If they get a third first round draft pick, then can they package those draft picks to try and work their way up the draft a little bit, or even use them to trade for a player. Again, I don't see them going for an upgrade or an impact type player, but I mean, could they bring in another guy in the same vein as a Kirby Dach or an Alex Newhook or something like that? A guy who's still young and still has a lot of potential in front of him, and maybe has some potential still to explore. It's difficult to emotionally detach oneself from their own players, but Hughes has to stick to the plan of the rebuild. Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm not really that concerned that he won't be able to do that. I mean, Evans is the only one who really, I think there would be a significant emotional attachment to. I mean, perhaps again, there's probably an emotional attachment to all four of those guys. Let's be honest, but I think at the same time, for me, the emotional attachment has to go both ways, right? Like, so if you want, if you expect the Canadiens to, to be emotionally attached to you, then I think at some point you need to be emotionally attached to the Canadiens and to what they're trying to do, and understand that, you being on the team for 5 years at $4 million doesn't help the rebuild, right? The rebuild that you've spent the last 3 years of your career working your ass off to move forward, and now all of a sudden, you're asking for a contract that is going to jeopardize that rebuild, right? You're asking for a contract that potentially is going to put that rebuild, behind the eight ball a little bit. And so for me, the conversation with Evans is, listen, man, we get that you think you're worth more money, and maybe you are, and maybe somebody else will pay you that money, but for you to be a part of our rebuild and to fit within the plan that we have for this team, the plan that you're well aware of because you've been part of it, this is what we can do, and we would love for you to be a part of it, and this is the role that we foresee for you in that rebuild. And if you're able to see beyond that and accept that 3.5 or $3.25 million over 4 years, then you can be a part of it. But if you think you're worth more than that, then then maybe you have to move on, right? And it comes down to how much do you want to be a part of this thing that you've been a big part of building, right? How much do you want to carry this through to to the to the end result, and that's kind of the decision that I think that Kent Hughes has to put to Jake Evans. Newhook can drop back to third line next season. Yes, I agree, Will. And again, it's not a bad situation. Newhook as your third line center. Yeah. Even if Newhook plays wing on that third line, and a guy like Kapanen is your centerman, then Newhook can play on the wing and he can take faceoffs when he needs to as a left-hander. But again, Newhook is not nearly the face-off man that Christian Dvorak is, right? He's not going to go in there and win 55 some percent of your face-offs. He's not at the same level. But I do think Newhook on the third line, it's not a bad place for him. We've seen an improvement in his defensive game, and we've seen him be able to incorporate his speed into his defensive game, and I think that would be certainly a positive if he were in that role. I think he would be a very good third line player for the Montreal Canadiens. Do I not see Beck replacing Dvorak next season? I just don't see signing Dvorak. Well, again, I don't see Beck replacing Dvorak. I see Beck more as a fourth liner, either with Evans or without Evans, whether Evans stays or not. And again, the biggest point of distinction between Dvorak and Beck is that Beck is not left-handed. And the biggest value that Dvorak brings, and the sticking point to saying, well, we don't need Dvorak, let him go, he's not bringing any value to us at this moment, is that he's the only left-handed, other than Newhook, he's the only left-handed centerman on the team. And he's probably the best face-off man on the team, right? So again, that's the only reason I suggest it for even a minute, is that going into next season without a left-handed centerman, or certainly going in with Newhook as your only left-handed face-off option, is probably not an ideal situation, right? So do I think that Beck can play a role and be in the lineup next year? Yeah, I do. But again, he doesn't fill the left-handed centerman role that Dvorak does. So that's kind of where I would be concerned about. And again, the point being as well that as much as you think that that Beck can stand in and just take over from from a Dvorak or even an Evans, there are going to be growing pains there. Right, a Owen Beck is a second year pro. Like, he will be a second year pro. He's a first year pro now. To sort of expect, you can hope that he steps in and just, things move seamlessly, but he's not going to give you the same things, certainly, that Jake Evans is giving you right now. Maybe he'll step in and immediately be on a level with Dvorak in a lot of ways, but there's going to be growing pains there. So instead of going into next season and giving, Owen Beck a little bit of, breathing space and a bit of a bumper period for him to learn the job, now all of a sudden you're asking him to sort of learn it on the fly. Enter tap. If Evans and Armia both go, then they might have to hang on to Dvorak with the realization that he walks at the end of the year. Yeah, and that's part of it too, right? Do you want to, what does the Montreal Canadiens lineup look like if all four of those guys go? Right, like who are you bringing up to replace Savard, Armia, Dvorak, and Evans? Keeping in mind that the Canadiens still have people will disagree with this, but it's been expressed publicly by management many, many times that they have an interest in Laval doing well, right? They have an interest in the Rocket, making the playoffs and going on a playoff run. So, the idea of, depleting Laval and calling up, Mailloux, Roy, Beck, whoever else, calling up four guys, assuming everybody's healthy, you're calling up four guys, right? You're calling up four guys, and if you've got an injury or two, now all of a sudden you're calling up six guys, and now you've taken, six players out of Laval. And you can say all you want that, Laval isn't the priority and Montreal is the priority, but again, Laval is a priority, and giving those players the experience of a first place season, or a run at the title and then a run at the playoffs, is something that the Canadiens have a really strong interest in having those guys experience. Too many projects on this team. Other teams in the division getting better a lot faster than us. Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. Blissful reverberations. I don't know that they're. Again, maybe your definition of project is different than mine. But the Canadiens are in a rebuild, and a lot of their players are young, and a lot of their players are developing. I don't know what team in the division is getting better faster than the Canadiens right now. Maybe you can point me in the direction of what team that is that you believe is improving at a faster rate than the Canadiens are. I don't see that personally. Again, saying there's too many projects on the team kind of demonstrates to me that you might not quite understand, the plan that management has for this team, and that, that they're in a rebuild, and so on and so forth. So speaking of the rebuild, we'll get into the treatment section of the show, guys. I'm going to try and move things on a little bit quickly. I know Coach Frenchie is getting ready to go live here shortly, so I'm going to try not to, get into his time. So we're going to talk about treatment. Treatment, of course, is our look at the rebuild and what's going on with the rebuild. And so tonight, we're going to look at a different aspect of the rebuild. We've already looked at a few other aspects of the rebuild. But tonight, we're going to look at failure. All right, we're going to talk about failure. A rebuild is about failure, right? When you undertake a rebuild as an organization, you have to accept that, there's going to be, some pain now in return for success in the future, right? You're going to have to suffer some pain now, but the payoff is success in the future. And sometimes if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to take on that pain now, maybe you're not ready to lose and finish in the bottom 3 or 4 of the league for a couple years in a row. But the reality is, sometimes if you're not willing to do that, then you doom your team, you doom your franchise to long-term mediocrity, right? Then you have teams that, they might sneak into the playoffs, but, typically they're knocked out in the first round or two. And they never really have much of an opportunity to actually win a Stanley Cup. But again, they might, have a decent regular season and make it into the playoffs. But, when it comes to the playoffs, they don't really have any, real chance of going anywhere, beyond that. Teams like, the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? Perennially in the playoffs, but really haven't shown that they can go beyond that. Teams like Carolina, teams like, there's a lot of teams like that, right? And so when you're in a rebuild, you have to prepare yourself. You have to, be ready to lose and to fail, right? And frankly, if a rebuild didn't mean losing, if a rebuild didn't mean that you were going to fail, then I think everybody would do it, right? The hesitance and the reluctance to rebuild is because a lot of teams aren't prepared, or a lot of fan bases or a lot of media groups are not prepared to sit through, 2 or 3 seasons of abject failure. There's a lot of teams in the NHL that won't even use the word rebuild, right? They're afraid to use, and I'm not talking about just like, teams in smaller markets. The Boston Bruins, right? Recently we saw it from Cam Neely. He's given a press conference and, you see him, dancing around and doing, word gymnastics just to not, say the word rebuild. And, again, if, the reason why teams are reluctant and afraid of a rebuild is because they don't know, or they're not prepared to deal with the short-term pain. And, failure is part of the process. And if you're going to rebuild and you're going to get better, you need to fail. And that's not just about a rebuild. That's about everything, right? Initially in a rebuild, if you fail, simply put, you're looking at better better access to prospects, right? If you finish in last place, you have the best chance to get the first overall draft pick. So from a purely pragmatic point of view, obviously failure is part of the process in that sense. But more importantly, failure is a way to get better. Failure makes you better. Failure, allows you to improve. Failure teaches you lessons, right? So when you fail, you're learning lessons. So like early on in a rebuild, failure might give you better access to high-end draft picks, right? The Montreal Canadiens, early in their rebuild, ended up with the first overall draft pick. They get Slafkovsky. They end up with a 5th overall draft pick. They get Reinbacher. They end up with the 5th overall draft pick. They get Ivan Demidov, right? Then in the same draft as Slafkovsky, they also get Owen Beck. In the same draft with Reinbacher, they also get Lane Hudson. So losing and failing in that sense means that you're getting access to those players, to better draft picks, especially if if you go out and shore up your scouting department and you take care of that aspect of your organization, you're going to have a good chance of bringing in some good players, and then you're going to, obviously, hopefully, as part of the rebuild, you're going to bring in the right coaches and the right development people. And so early on, that's sort of what failure is for a rebuilding team. But failure also is, like I said, it's an opportunity to learn lessons. So here's a quote from Marty St. Louis that I really liked recently that he gave in an interview with Eric Engels. He's talking about the rebuild. He's talking more so about individual players here, but I think it also applies to the team as a whole. And he says, the failure, if you see it as a failure, becomes an emotional weight. If you see it as a learning process, now you look for the answers. That's what you learn, is that the answers are everywhere. But if you're so wrapped up with the emotions of failing, you're wasting time. L'échec, si vous le considérez comme un échec, devient un poids émotionnel. Si vous voyez cela comme un processus d'apprentissage, vous cherchez maintenant les réponses. C'est ce que l'on apprend, c'est que les réponses sont partout. Mais si vous êtes tellement absorbé par les émotions de l'échec, vous perdez du temps, right? So, you can view failure as a failure, or you can view it as an opportunity, right? And this is what Marty St. Louis is talking about, right? And he's talking about, like, failure gives you an experience. Failure gives you knowledge. And like Marty St. Louis says here in this quote, failure, assuming that you're looking to succeed, right? Assuming that your ultimate goal is to eventually succeed, failure forces you to look at yourself and ask yourself questions, right? Why did I fail? And what do I have to do so that I don't fail again, right? Why didn't this work tonight? Why did we lose tonight? Why did we get beat 9-2 by the Seattle Kraken? And what do I have to do to improve myself and to ensure that I don't continue to do the same things that cause me to fail, right? As an individual player, why can't I score, or why am I struggling? Why has the coach benched me? Why am I making a lot of turnovers? Like why is this, these why questions? These are and again, Marty St. Louis is really big on this. He talks about, eventually the players start to coach themselves because they can self-evaluate, because they ask themselves these questions. And so, Marty St. Louis doesn't have to tell them what to do all the time, right? Like he talked about it the other day about them, him not wanting to have players that are robots, right? He doesn't want to have robots that he just simply, tells them what to do and they go out and do it. Eventually they need to learn how to do some of this stuff on his own. And I think there's a lot of lessons for us to learn as fans about failure here too, right? So when the Canadiens are struggling in October and November, and everybody's ready to jump off a bridge because the Montreal Canadiens aren't doing as well as as the fans hoped that they would, the fans are viewing it as a failure, right? And instead of viewing it as, another step in the rebuild, another step in the process, the fans become frustrated and they start calling for players to be traded, and they start calling for players to be let go, and they start calling for players to be sent down. They start calling for the coaches to be fired. They start calling for the GMs to be fired. They start calling for the rebuild to be, the rebuild's not working. We have to end it here. The rebuild just isn't working. We're not getting anywhere. This is a failure. It's regression. So if you view it that way, as a fan, obviously as a player, it's one thing to view it that way. It's gonna stunt your growth if you don't view it as an opportunity. But as a fan, I think we need to look at it as this is part of the process, and this is part of the rebuilding of this organization, and that October and November were not failures. October and November were stepping stones to December and January, right? And the moving forward of this organization, right? The players are getting better, the team is getting better, they're learning, they're playing important games. Everything is a step towards the next thing. Even the failures, right? Even the steps backwards, there's something being learned there. And so, so for me as a fan, this is sort of, everyone says that I'm too optimistic and I'm too nice and whatever. But, I believe in the rebuild. And I believe that, just because, something doesn't work out on a particular night doesn't mean that it's a failure. And even if it is a failure, that failure is an opportunity to learn something and to get better, right? And so, the failures, the losses at the beginning of the season, they were part of the process. We often heard Marty St. Louis talk about, we're trying to teach these guys how to win. We're teaching them winning habits. The players individually were learning lessons, and the team was learning lessons. And perfect example, right? Arbor Jacki, beginning of the year, talking about players learning lessons. Arbor Jacki was a player who early in the year struggled, right? Coming out of the preseason, he struggled with his, staying out of the penalty box. He struggled with the physical aspect of the game. He struggled with his role as the quote-unquote enforcer on the team. And, that was something that he had a hard time with, right? He also struggled with, learning the new defensive zone systems, right? Like he wasn't doing well with that, so he was out there running around taking bad penalties, and he was also out there, making bad reads and having a hard time in his own zone. And, the Canadiens sat him down for a couple games, and some of the fans freaked out, right? It's a failure. And, Marty St. Louis and Arbor Jacki don't get along. And George Larac talked about how the two of them got in a fight and didn't like each other. And Arbor Jacki was going to be traded, and that he wasn't long for this team, and blah, blah, blah. And everyone was making, much ado about nothing. And the reality was that, this was not a failure. This was Arbor Jacki learning a lesson, right? His failures, his inability to adapt immediately to the new systems was, an opportunity for him to learn and become better. And now, 2 months later, we see a far greater version of Arbor Jacki. We see that he's learned his lessons and he's become a better player because of those failures. He's learned from those mistakes and he's learned from them, and he's treated as part of the process. He doesn't go out looking to fight everybody. He doesn't go out seeking out big hits. He plays a much more patient game, and he's learned lessons. So here's a quote from Jacki, right? And again, you can tell that he's reading from the same playbook as Marty St. Louis, but he says, "The more you fail, the more you learn. Success breeds confidence, but anytime you fail, it's not really a failure. It's just a learning step that there's something you've got to change or adjust to get around that hump in the road. That's when you become the teacher. It's when you can reflect on your own mistakes and before the coaches do, and they don't even have to tell you. Coming into this league, there's so many things that you have to learn and figure out. It's just not struggles. There's just some things you didn't even know." Right? So again, very reflective of his coach, right? And you can only imagine how many times St. Louis and Jacki have had conversations, or they've talked about these things. But again, here's Jacki talking about his struggles and how his ability to treat them as an opportunity. And now he's gotten to the point where he's learning on his own. Obviously the coaches are still there for him, but he's able to recognize his mistakes and what he needs to do without having to be told. And that's when you become good veteran hockey players, is when you start to be able to self-evaluate and you be able to coach yourself and learn lessons on your own. David Reinbacher last year in Cloton, right? Everybody made a big deal out of the fact that David Reinbacher took a step backwards, and the team in Cloton in the Swiss League was terrible, and that he wasn't he wasn't developing the way you would expect from a 5th overall draft pick, and that he was a bust, and the Canadiens should have gotten Matvei Michkov instead, and all this back and forth, blah 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 blah. But the reality is those failures in Cloton last year will be huge experiences that David Reinbacher can draw on for the rest of his career. Here's an 18-year-old kid playing pro hockey against men in a dysfunctional organization. I think they had three coaches over the course of last year. They played terribly. And, he was forced, not only to deal with all of that, but to deal with it in a bit of a leadership role, because he was the best player on that team. And just getting through that season, even though his numbers were down, that failure is a learning experience. Right? He knows what that looks like. He knows what that feels like, and he knows how to deal with it. And so if he runs into that again in his career, he can draw upon that, and he can use that experience going forward. There's the 42nd man, Hockey Illuminati, 41 seconds in the NCAA. Cole Caulfield, right? Everyone thought Cole Caulfield was regressing last year. How come Cole Caulfield's not scoring at the same rate as he did last year? How come he's struggling? What's wrong with Cole Caulfield? Why is he so bad? Well, because he was working on new things, and what looked like a failure to the rest of the world was a process for Cole Caulfield. And now we see this year that he's back in the lineup, and he's doing his stuff again. Like, he's scoring goals, but he's a much better hockey player all around, right? So what everybody else was perceiving as a regression or a failure last year was actually Cole Caulfield going through something, right? Logan Mailloux right now in Laval. Everyone seems to think he's fallen off a cliff, and that he's, well, again, I don't know this, and we'll see where he how he comes out the other end, but to me, there's every bit the possibility that he's down in Laval working on, different aspects of his game, which is slowing down his offensive production. But if in the end he comes out as, a better all-around defender, and is able to regain, some of his offensive flair and his offensive talents, then that's great, right? So Reinbacher is a great example. Caulfield's a great example. Jacki's a great example. Mayhew's a great example. This is what I mean by by your failures being important, right? And when you're in a rebuild, you're not going to succeed right away, and you're sort of accepting that you're going to fail, and that you need to have the right attitude about those failures. Otherwise, the rebuild's not going to work. Look at Chicago, right? Chicago's freaking out. Chicago's rebuild is only on year 2, right? This is Connor Bedard's second year. And because they're not having success, they're freaking out, right? So they're treating their failures as failures instead of steps in the right direction and part of a process towards getting better. Part of that is because they haven't really, done the right things as far as, they haven't focused on building from within and building with their prospects. They've gone out and signed a bunch of free agents and made a bunch of trades. But again, they're not accepting, like what makes them believe that the second year of a rebuild is going to be, a positive experience and that they're going to win, a significant number of games. Like, why do they believe that? Like, I don't understand that. Just because you got Connor Bedard doesn't mean that, you've got a golden ticket. You still have to, rebuild. And so, teams that treat, their failures like failures instead of, the way Marty St. Louis does, as Billy D says, in a philosophical way, they're doomed. Their rebuilds are doomed to fail. Darren, growing pains are to be expected. I think the Habs will be a really good team in a couple more seasons. Go Habs, go. Yeah, absolutely. But again, a big part of that is not just dealing with your failures, but accepting them and using them. And that's why today I thought that failure was a good topic to talk about when it comes to the rebuild. Because, failure is inevitable in professional sport. And it's even more inevitable when you're rebuilding. And part of a rebuild is embracing that failure and using it to your advantage. Like I said, early in the rebuild, you can use it to give yourself access to good hockey players, right? You higher picks in the draft, and then later in the rebuild, you use it as a learning tool. Like you learn it, you treat it as an opportunity to get better, an opportunity to learn lessons, and an opportunity to experience things that you're going to need going forward, like playing meaningful games, right? That was the goal this year, was that the Canadiens would play meaningful games, right? I had this argument with Coach Frenchie. He's upset that the Canadiens are not winning these meaningful games, and the goal was not to win meaningful games. The goal was to play meaningful games, and the reason why you want to play meaningful games is because playing meaningful games gives you an experience. Playing meaningful games teaches you lessons. Playing meaningful games makes you a better player because now you know what meaningful games feel like. And even if you're losing them now, the experience that you're getting from losing them will help you win those meaningful games as your career progresses and as the rebuild moves along. So that's the topic for tonight. Again, I hope it wasn't too preachy, but again, as fans, I think we have a lot to learn from that. In that, just because the Canadiens are not, producing on the ice the way we expect them to or the way we want them to, doesn't necessarily mean it's a failure. And if you can view it in the bigger picture and view it as a process and, a team that's moving forward and in the right direction and view failures for what they really are, then, I think it'll certainly make your experience as a Montreal Canadiens fan a little bit more pleasurable. So that's it for the treatment section of the show. So we're going to get to the last section of the show, guys. We're running a little bit late. Again, I didn't want to go past 9:30. But we'll get to prognosis. Again, prognosis is where we talk about the future of the team with a focus on Canadiens prospects. And as I led into the show earlier, the prospect that we're going to talk about tonight is, of course, Owen Beck. And Owen Beck is in the news right now because, of course, he got called up for the kind of the third time, I guess, this season last night. To replace Kirby Dach on the second line. So Owen Beck is our feature guy, as you can see in the picture. Played last year for the Saginaw Spirit, won the Memorial Cup. He is currently 21 years old. He's 6 foot and about 195 pounds. He's a right-handed centerman, and he was drafted in the second round, 33rd overall in 2022. For me, he projects to be a strong bottom six forward. He's very reliable defensively, is strong on faceoffs, but he also has a pretty decent upside with some good offensive skill, especially in the role of a bottom six player. So for a bottom six player, he certainly demonstrates a level of offensive skill, which is certainly beneficial. He's a powerful skater. He has speed. He's a very hard worker and is very, very competitive on the ice. You don't see him take very many shifts off. He has very little quit in him. And he plays at a high tempo, and he can bring energy to a game with his physical play. So all of those things, to me, are reasons why I think he could be a fourth liner with the potential to even maybe move up to a third line. But again, in a fourth line role, he's a guy who I think can excel at that. So, in the fourth line, I think he could be one of the best fourth line centermen in the NHL. Obviously, on a third line, he could also probably do okay there. But again, I don't think he stands out from the rest of the league as a third liner the way that he might as a fourth liner. 32 points in 47 games with Laval. So far, he has played in 7 games this season with Montreal, and he has 0 points. He, of course, did play that one game 2 years ago when he got called up in the middle of the junior season as an emergency call-up. He was called up earlier this year when Heineman was injured. The Michael Pezzetta experiment really wasn't working out, so they did finally bring Owen Beck up and put him in that role. He struggled a little bit in the first 3 games. And then looked a lot better in the final 3 games of that call-up before he was sent back down to Laval. And then, as I mentioned a minute ago, he was just recently called up yesterday to step into the lineup and replace Kirby Dach on the second line. He looked comfortable in that role. I don't think he was, spectacular by any means. He didn't stand out positively or negatively, but he certainly didn't look out of place in that role. With Newhook and Laine on that line. For me, I don't see him ideally as a top 6 forward for the Canadiens in the future, but I think what he is showing is that he does have that ability to move up and down the lineup, and he can be, a bit of a utility guy in the future. If they do need a guy to move up because of injury, then he can certainly do that. But I don't think his chair, to use Marty St. Louis vernacular, is as a top 6 forward. I don't think that the Canadiens ideally would have him in the NHL this year. I think they're calling him up out of necessity more than anything else. As I talked about earlier in the show, I think the Canadiens view that there's value in these players like Beck and Roy and Mailloux and Jacky and Tuck and all these other guys, of keeping that core together in Laval. So that they can, play together and experience what it's like to go on a run for the title, and then potentially a playoff run as well. And I think that they would like for those guys to get that experience and then come to training camp next year and see which one of them is capable of making the team. I do expect, again, I shouldn't say I expect. I think that he has a strong possibility of making the team next year. Again, I'm not going to say I expect it because I don't think that that's a fair expectation to put on anybody. But certainly what we've seen from him so far is a player who can do that next year. But for now, I think his best place is in Laval. He can gain experience there. Again, this is his first year as a pro. He'll obviously play a lot more minutes down there, and he'll play a much more important role with Laval than he certainly would in Montreal. I think he has a leadership role to play in Laval, and, he would be, he's in a top 6 role in Laval, and I think it gives him an opportunity to develop, his all-around game a lot more. And again, the opportunity to play really meaningful games late in the season and then really meaningful games in a playoff setting, I think will be a huge benefit to him as his career progresses. So that's it for prognosis, guys, and that's going to be it for tonight's show. I do see that the attendance has dropped off a little bit here. I suspect a number of you have taken off and headed over to see Coach Frenchie, because Coach Frenchie, I believe, is on the air as of 10 minutes ago. So I think what I probably will do here is I will end the show I will ask you one more time, guys, if you haven't done so yet, to please subscribe. Down below, you see the like and subscribe right here. Hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell. Hit the thumbs up if you're inclined, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching in a replay. Again, we're trying to grow the channel. We're close to 300 subscribers now. We really want to get to 500. And if you're interested in being part of our family, part of our group, part of our community, where you can come and have civil conversations about the Canadiens. Maybe you can also, if you have any feedback on this show, guys, this show is very different than what we do with the Habs After Dark show. Again, this is a weekly show where we talk about the team and we talk about, topics of interest with the team. But I don't want it to be a situation where I'm just talking at you guys. I do want it to be a little bit more interactive. And, I see there have been some questions, and I do appreciate those who did send them my way. But again, in the future, I want to see if we can figure out a way to make it a little bit more interactive than it has been already. So if you have feedback, things that you like about the show, things that you don't like, things that you think could be better or improved, then I'm certainly all ears, and don't sort of concern yourself about offending me. I'm a big boy. I have big shoulders. I'm more than able to handle that. So don't worry about that. But I certainly welcome your input. Thank you, everybody who did watch. Thank you for coming. Thank you for those who asked questions, for your participation. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde, à tous qui ont posé des questions, tous qui ont écouté l'émission. Je vous remercie beaucoup. Je vous apprécie aussi. If you haven't subscribed, guys, like I said, hit the button. Si vous n'êtes pas encore membre de notre canal, vous pouvez taper sur le bouton subscribe en bas. Vous pouvez aussi donner comment on dit ça, thumbs up, le pouce en haut. Je ne sais pas comment dire ça. Yeah, and if you're watching in a replay, guys, I appreciate you as well. If you have questions, things that you'd like me to talk about in other shows, certainly put it in the questions in the comments section, and I'll do my best to get to them as soon as I can. So once again, guys, it's been a great week for the Canadiens. 2 wins over Ottawa and Carolina. This week coming up, they have games tomorrow night, Thursday, against the San Jose Sharks, Saturday and Monday against Buffalo. And we will see you on Wednesday next week, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Atlantic time. I look forward to seeing you all then. We will, of course, also be on the air. Nous serons aussi sur les ondes après les 2 matchs ou les 3 matchs de cette semaine. Il y a un match demain soir contre San Jose, ainsi que samedi et lundi contre les Sabres de Buffalo. On va être sur les ondes après le match avec Habs After Dark, ou moi j'appelle Habs After Dark le bleu blanc rouge nuit. Le bleu, like bleu nuit, but bleu blanc rouge nuit after dark. So yeah, if you guys want to join us for all that, that would be amazing. So have a good one, guys. I appreciate everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you tomorrow night after the game. Peace out.
Pour un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, I want to be in that building on a Saturday night.